Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon if you are in Australia or perhaps in APAC, somewhere else watching us this morning. My name's Stephanie Hopper. I'm one of the directors of the talent practice at Capfinity and joined by my co-host, Celine Floyd. She will introduce herself shortly. A few words on Capfinity. We're a global business. We're based in Birmingham, London, Dublin, various US locations and Sydney, Australia. And we've been helping organisations to find candidates, develop employees and transform their business around our USP of strengths-based assessment and development for over 16 years. Celine and I both work on Altitude, our leadership proposition, which is a market-leading method of assessing and developing your leaders through a strength lens. Celine, you made it back from the school.
Hello, I did, and not too bedraggled by the UK rain. So it is delightful to be here. Lovely to see you all. So Celine Floyd, Director of the Talent Practice at Capfinity, with a specialist area in leadership assessment. And we are delighted to be here today for what I think is our 13th episode. Steph, not sure how that's happened. But yeah, 13th episode, and so exciting to be looking at and speaking about a whole other side of the world today, which is wonderful on multiple levels. I'm sure we'll get into some of the exciting nuances and different global differences. So we are joined by two fantastic guests, Lara and Catrina, and who will be able to tell you more about themselves and have first-hand experience of what it's like to work and lead in organisations in Asia-Pac. So Lara, perhaps I can come to you first to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you're passionate about leadership.
Sure. So Lara Partridge, Global Head of Talent for Santen. The accent should be a little bit of a giveaway, originally Australian. Yeah. But I've been in Asia now for 12 years and I've spent 8 of those years working for the world's biggest emerging markets bank focused on Asia, Africa and Middle East. My role after that, again, talent focused in financial services, looking particularly at developing Asia talent, everything from junior all the way up to most senior banking talent. And then very recently, I took a career change and left behind a decade in fin services to come over to work in life sciences. So another global role, but with a big orientation to the Asia region, focusing on pharmaceutical and social innovation and the talent work and leadership work that goes alongside that. So that's the shortest version of my CV.
Perfect, Lara. Thank you. And Catrina, same for you. Hello, welcome.
Thank you. I'm General Counsel at Sydney Metro. For those of you who don't know what Sydney Metro is, and you may not, it's a government agency in New South Wales, Australia. It's similar to Crossrail in London, except we already have one railway line in operation and we're building 3 more. It's about 100 kilometres of rail, 50 train stations eventually, and a $50 million infrastructure project. So largest infrastructure project in Australia. So if you're an infrastructure junkie, it's a good place to be. But I started my career in a large CBD law firm in the construction and infrastructure group. I worked there and did my training, and then I actually took the leap and took an in-house job at Qantas, and I worked there for several years and really enjoyed the flight benefits. I then went and worked for a large listed Australian property developer. I then had a couple of years off having babies and then decided to go into government because I didn't want to travel anymore. I had 2 small young children. And I thought government would be a more family-friendly job. So I've been at Sydney Metro since 2013. And now I'm the General Counsel and I'm responsible for legal, audit, fraud and corruption and probity within our entity, which is a fairly new entity as well, but it's part of the transport portfolio in the New South Wales state government.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And you're being very humble, Catrina, because Catrina got an award last year. I think you should tell people about your award.
Thank you, Stephanie. I got an award in the National Association of Women in Construction. I got Businesswoman of the Year last year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Important we shout these things out for each other. So I'm really delighted that Lara and Catrina have joined us today. And I think everyone around the world has been pivoting to hybrid working, but maybe at different paces and different times. And I think hybrid actually is a term that means different things for different organisations and different leaders. And that's a result of maybe the timing of the impact, but also cultural differences within, different organisations. And I guess at the moment, there's this kind of backdrop looming of the Great Resignation as well, behind the fact that in lots of parts of the world, people are trying to find a way to live with COVID and to, balance the new sort of ways of working. And I guess there's also plenty of reports, aren't there, that people are working longer hours because they're not doing a commute and they just kind of add that time to their desk when they're at home. So I'm really super interested in Lara and Catrina's thoughts today because I know that the journey's been very different in Asia Pac for both of them. Lara's based in Singapore and Catrina in Sydney. And I guess it'd be interesting just to start, maybe come to you, Catrina. What kinds of challenges you're seeing at the moment in Australia, with the adoption of hybrid working for organisations and sort of businesses that are kind of changing the world of work in your part of the world?
Yeah, I might just set the context for Sydney because it is a bit different to the UK. When COVID hit in March, April last year, we had an initial 4-week lockdown. And then we were able to largely contain the COVID for a while to low numbers or zero in Sydney, a little bit more in Melbourne. And whilst we sort of on 2 days' notice rushed off, got trained in Teams, and we all thought, what is this thing, Teams? But we all quickly learned how to use it. We have pretty much been working from home since in my organisation, particularly the office-based workers, not obviously the people on site, on the construction sites. So even though there was only a 4-week, you can't leave your house, we have been working at home since. But we've had more social freedoms. We have been able to go out. We had a pretty normal summer, over pretty normal Christmas with a few light lockdowns. And then we were just getting back into transitioning to hybrid work in the first 6 months of this year, with some resistance to people coming back into the office, I might say. And then we had our second wave hit in June, and we've been in a 3.5-month lockdown, which is how I explain the wild and woolly state of my hair, because I have not been able to get a hairdressing appointment till 1 November. So I apologise for that. So our context is a little bit different, and we haven't been locked down nearly as much as you guys have. But I am looking forward to my children going back to school tomorrow. But some of the things we've found in, the challenges with remote working. Initially, we found productivity went up. It certainly didn't decline. This year, it's been different. And this year, we've definitely seen impacts of stress and well-being in our people going down. And I think a lot of that has to do with just constantly sitting in a screen, not having breaks. It takes 30% more glucose to be in a Teams meeting than it is to be in a normal meeting. And some of the things we've lost over the last 18 months, I think, and for me, are one of the big ones, and my personal grief has been about the loss of camaraderie and bonding in our teams, because I think office banter is very important. We've still got all the responsibility of work, but none of the fun. I think for the younger members of the team, the whole learning by osmosis has been lost, and that's been particularly hard for them, really hard for new starters. I've got team members I haven't met for 18 months. And collaboration and innovation has been so much harder, we've found. And it's very hard to get people into the swing of your culture, of your organisation in remote working. And now that we're starting to look to hybrid working, I think those challenges will get better, but they won't completely ameliorate, because one of the challenges we've got now is we've increased so many new people in the last 18 months, but we haven't got enough office space. So we'll be going back on sort of maybe 2 to 3 days a week in the office eventually, but we're still working from home now. But so a lot of those things of remote working will still go on. And it's likely that if you won't be seeing people nearly as regularly as you used to. In fact, it will be often that you won't have the whole team in the office, because we can't fit them. So a lot of ours is we don't have office space anymore. We've also found that a lot of people have moved from Sydney. Because we work for New South Wales government, they've moved within the state of New South Wales. That might be 7 hours away. So how can you say, let's have a team meeting tomorrow, let's do an innovation workshop? So and people are used to working in trackies and Ugg boots now. So I think there will be a challenge. I know there'll be a challenge of getting people back into the office, but unless we get them back in part-time to sort of help with the challenges we've found with remote working, we won't be able to do that. So I think, I think they're partly, there's been a lot of benefits of COVID, of flexibility, but there's been some burdens as well. And it's trying to work out ways of working where you retain the benefits of flexibility, but then trying to find a way to address the challenges. And that's what we're looking at now. I'm not saying we've got the answer. We're actually behind you in the UK. So, because we won't probably be going back into the office till after Christmas.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, a really different.
Yeah.
It's really interesting hearing you sort of paint that out, actually. And I think what you said about we've had all the responsibility of work and none of the fun is really true. I remember saying to a client about 6 months ago, we were thinking about doing one of those quizzes on Zoom. And he went, F off, don't want a quiz on Zoom. I know that now, right? I just don't want quizzes on Zoom. I want
enough trivia, enough.
Exactly, enough.
Yeah.
Lara, tell us, for yourself in Singapore, what your reflections are, I guess, on some of those challenges around hybrid working and things Catrina's shared.
Well, I really like Catrina's comments about connection, because I've started a new job where, with the exception of a few local colleagues, I've literally not met anyone, including a whole bunch of people who work for me. And so I have really acutely felt that, and have had team members join under the same situation. So I think that has had a big impact on what it feels like to join and feel a part of organizations. Yeah. I spent a lot of time actually chatting to colleagues and peers to try and get a sense of the extent to which I think Asia is the same or different. And I think we're probably quite aligned to the Australia situation, though the variation across Asia is so vastly different. So I've got colleagues in China who have been back in the office forever, and I've got colleagues in Japan where there's still a state of emergency declared. In Singapore, we're still kind of technically in a lockdown. And so there's sort of no consistent experience. And as such, there hasn't quite yet emerged the data or the insights that we're all waiting for about how is hybrid work going to work, because I still feel like for a lot of organizations we're still waiting. Some early movers, so my old industry, I've got a lot of press for some of the big brands coming out and insisting that everyone's all back in, or that a company will determine a proportion of time you spend in the office, and that has been met certainly in the sentiment here in the HR press and in the media with a lot of pushback. And then there's been the other kind of end of the spectrum, lots of the tech companies who have big footprint presence here, and the company I work for, fortuitously, who have said we need to figure out a new way of working, and we need to make that clear to our employees. And I think the big insight for me, for all those companies who are still holding back and waiting to kind of state their position to their employees, is the sentiment here is that it's incredibly valuable when the company comes out and says, this is what we want and this is how we're going to try and work it out together, because we've spent 2 years in so much uncertainty, in such a threat state, to actually try and get a little bit more certainty, to know the plan forward, to know that you're going back to work after Christmas. That just brings a huge amount of relief to people, and I think that's got to be top of mind for everyone as we kind of figure it all out together.
Absolutely. I was just reflecting on, I think I read somewhere, and Lara, you might have read this, that because Catrina referenced the fact that more people have moved out of Sydney. I think I read somewhere that in Asia, there's been a 10-fold increase or something in people moving countries or requests to move countries.
Yeah. There's a really interesting, I was thinking about it kind of in relation to all the press that's been going on about how overworked we're all feeling. Your comment before about we gave up our commute and just added it to our hours. One of the big phenomenon here is, and certainly it's been the experience in a lot of Asian locations, foreign talent, expat talent, making the decision after not being able to see their families for 2 years that it's time to go home. And so here in Singapore, for the first time since population stats were recorded in the 50s, there's been a really significant decline, greater than 4%, which is the highest or lowest, depending on which way you flip the numbers, that it's ever been. And it's primarily the foreign talent who are making the decision that they want to go home or closer to home in order, because my punchline, particularly to my mother, who is very upset that her grandchildren are in another country, has always been, don't worry, we're just a plane right away. And we haven't been able to get a plane home or back to the UK, where my in-laws are from, for 2 years. And so that's really changed the dynamic. And I think people are just making decisions about their families and their careers together, when historically they might have just made decisions. So
I think that was a really scary, part of it. Remains a really scary part of COVID, something we all took so for granted, as you said, Lara, that we could just travel anywhere to see anyone. And I think that's where a lot of the trauma has come from. We've talked in previous episodes around how it's the pandemic has wobbled the very foundations that we've all been kind of living on and the way we understand the world. So take us a long time to kind of really recover. Talking of being overworked, we were reading up on the Microsoft 2021 Work Trends report, and there were, I guess, some slightly worrying stats in there around APAC specifically. 54% of people reporting that they feel overworked, and 38% of employees saying that they feel exhausted, having had a year away from the workplace. And then as we were just talking, some stats in there as well around people considering change. And I think we've seen that in the pandemic, it's causing people to pivot. And so this report said that for Asia-Pac, 50% of people are actually considering changing employers, and even more are considering changing careers. So I guess we're just interested in your views on what impact that is having and could have on employers in the region. So I'll come back to Lara. First of all, Lara, what are your thoughts on the impacts of that?
It's such an interesting phenomenon, and this great resignation. I was reading the Washington Post article this week. The phenomenon seems really strongly expressed in the US, but interestingly here in Asia, there's lots of talk about it. But again, I think the data is still emerging because it's such a complex thing. There are parts of Asia, anyone who's had the good fortune to live in places like Tokyo or Hong Kong will know that apartments are incredibly small. And so when the pandemic struck and everyone went home, I've seen the inside of more of my colleagues' bedrooms, kitchen tables. I used to work for a lady who would have her Zoom meetings from her daughter's bedroom, sat at her child's little table and chairs because it was the only place to sit. And it's only in places like Singapore, actually, where you'll find it's more common that people have a spare room or the space, really. And the other phenomenon that I think is really important, and not unique to Asia, but very prevalent, is the amount of family members who live in a space. So I remember in my previous role at the very start of the pandemic, having calls with colleagues, and they were taking their calls from their cars because it was literally the only private space that didn't include their parents or their in-laws or their children. So I think how suitable people's homes have been to adapt. And I've known people who've moved houses just purely now because they feel like this is a longer term thing and they need a different space. So I think there's that at play. I think the other kind of phenomenon here that's really interesting is, and varying by country, is some of the government focus on prioritization of local national talent and the complexity that adds to the environment. Here in Singapore, the requirements for a work pass have gone up. The government have put that, so they've sort of raised the barrier for foreign talent to be able to get a work pass to be able to work here. And so that has started to trigger some movement. I did a bit of research prior to today to try and say, well, where is the Great Resignation showing up? And it seems to be across Asia a lot around media or agency type work that was historically freelance. The anecdote is that people have sort of seen this as now permission. Maybe 2 years ago they weren't feeling brave enough, but now they know they can work from home. And so some of those industry sectors, and it's showing up in some of the news reports from the Philippines. But I still think it's emerging. I still think there's a lot of complexity going on. And again, while everyone's feeling so unsure, I do think some people are weighing up. Maybe it'll play out a little bit more in the next 12 to 18 months once things start to be a bit more positive, perhaps. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you. And Catrina, does that resonate with your experience and what you're seeing?
Yeah, we're projecting a Great Resignation next year. Our public health orders are fully released from 1 December. Then it's Christmas.
Yeah.
But I know organisations, particularly the professional services organisations, they're planning for a large proportion, or like 40% of their 20s and 30s to resign, because people have had time to contemplate, they think about what's important in life, and how fragile it is. And, when they start to stick your head above the parapet and look what's out there, you can see there's a lot of amazing opportunities, and they're looking for better jobs. I even read an article the other day that the yellow wiggle, for those of you who have small children, has quit because she's had time to contemplate in COVID. So the wiggle is happening.
When you first said that, I thought it was some beautiful sculpture or something in Sydney, or some kind of landmark. And then I remembered the Wiggles. I mean, I can't forget their music. So no, I do know who you mean. Yeah. Oh, she's left, has she? The yellow Wiggles left.
She's quitting. So important. But and so I think we are predicting that next year. And I think once the job ads start to appear in the new year, it'll spiral. So and we in the infrastructure industry, we had a talent shortage before COVID happened. Because we're in an infrastructure boom in Australia, and the government is still pouring more money into infrastructure to help the COVID recovery, but we were in one before COVID anyway. We get a lot of our talent from the UK. The rail family is very strong across the oceans with that. But we've basically had our borders shut for 18 months. We've had no immigration. So skill retention of people and skill vacancies is going to be big on most horizons in Australia next year, but in particular infrastructure. So staff retention is a really big thing we've got to focus on. And it's not just about, obviously salaries are important, but we're really conscious that it's going to be about investing in team culture, communication, trust, effective training to try and retain people. And I think culture is the most important, actually, of those things. If someone's going to double their money, it's not much you can do about that. But, if you're happy in a job and you like the culture, a bit more money is not going to move you, I don't think.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a perfect storm. You've got the kind of push from the individuals who, as you say, are reflecting and kind of thinking about different things. And then I read a report last week that said that we're anticipating globally that 87 million roles will become redundant by 2025 in terms of their nature and what we need from them. And there'll be the creation of 97 million new roles. So it's like people are contemplating what they do, and then you've got the landscape of work changing as well. And it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to know how to prepare for that. So you mentioned there, Catrina, some really great things that organisations can do to try to improve retention. Lara, is there anything else that you're seeing kind of happening that's helping there?
I think it's really smart in what Catrina said about the anticipation and not waiting till the problem is on top of you to be having to be reactive. So I think the proactivity is the right piece. I know, and I was smiling even pre the yellow wiggle joke about my very dusty recruitment career. And I remember the week after people had had a holiday break and New Year's, the influx of calls from people saying,
that's not happen.
Yeah, and so you imagine the kind of containment over 2 years of thinking potentially that way about your consulting career, your banking career. And so I think there might be that flurry of energy. And so I think it is. I mean, I think from a talent perspective, it is about letting people know that they're valued and there's lots of reasons for busyness right now. Everyone's maybe not doing their best work. We're perhaps all on a good day still only at 90%. But I think you have to make that extra bit of effort with your people still, and not just, I don't know, there's been a lot of normalizing of staring into lots of screens of little square pictures day in and day out. And your comment before about, it's exhausting. And I think maybe people need it now more than ever. Yeah.
100%. And there's a couple of comments from Andrea Kirby in the chat. She said people on our event today were saying they think people are waiting to get out and about before they shift jobs. One thing at a time. Lots of reshuffle in tech, moving between all the companies and getting huge salary increases. And then construction recovery is not helping women recover from COVID. We need more input into the more feminized industries to help women who were the most impacted. I don't know if you've got any.
Women have definitely been more impacted in Australia as well, because we only had a 2-week shutdown for our construction industry, and it's definitely been the hospitality that where people have lost jobs, and the more traditionally female. So it is, that's I agree. We've got to be more focused on that. And tourism's dead for Australia. It's a huge part of our industry. A lot of female jobs in that as well. So, unless they all want to become builders, we're going to have to do something like that.
Never say never.
Well, we that too. We're encouraging that too. We want female engineers. Absolutely.
And the yellow wiggle. Right. In summary, so today, lots of great chat, I guess, about the journey that we've been on in Asia Pacific, and how that's looked different to the rest of the world, particularly with what Celine and I are familiar with over in the UK. There was a sort of plan to do hybrid, and then it kind of went a bit wrong, didn't it, ladies, for Asia? And you were back in another lockdown. And so hybrid's something that's being thought about now, I guess. I think that the point around we've had all the responsibility of work and not the fun, and then the importance of building that back into work and finding ways of doing that not on Zoom is probably preferable. And in fact, Andrea in the chat has talked about the great attraction rather than the great resignation, which I think is a good way of looking at it. What are we doing to keep people engaged and attracted? And then there was this sort of thing around, I guess, people moving roles and the fact that countries have been locked down. And so none of us would have thought about probably moving countries in terms of getting a job in another country, but we might have moved abroad because we wanted to move our family back to another location and work remotely. So that's kind of slightly different dynamic that's existed in the talent market so far. And let's not forget the yellow wiggle. Let's go to Lara. Final comment from you, Lara.
I'm running through all the wiggle jokes in my head, and I think I think the thing that I've observed is that we need to treat this as an adaptive problem. That all the efforts to do it where people have just tried to simplify it or be like a one size fits all, spend 2/3 of your week in the office and we'll tell you which days, all of those seem to be failing spectacularly. So I think we don't need to come at this with technical solutions. We need to kind of see it for what it is, and kind of appreciate that it's complex, and we need to think hard on it. I don't think this is a quick win space. I think this is for people who really care, and I can hear it in the way that Catrina's thinking, not just about her own role, but about her whole industry sector. It's for people who care about it to really think hard on how we come up with the solutions that are right for people who've had a really tough last 24 months. Yeah.
100%. Thank you, Lara. Catrina, final thought from you.
Well, we've focused a little bit, I think, on the hardships of COVID, and I'm not underplaying them because it has been very awful for many people, but there have been a lot of good things that have come out of it too. For me personally, it's been life-changing for me to sort of, as a working mother with 2 kids, to get my fitness back and try and spend some of that time where I wasn't commuting for me, which I hadn't had for 10 years. And I didn't even realise that I was on this treadmill and I did not know how to get off it. And COVID allowed me to do that. So there was a lot of good in COVID for me. And I think other people too. And I just think, we achieved in 1 month, a step change, which normally would have taken 10 years. So I think the big challenge is how do we develop ways of working to keep those benefits and address the challenges? And I'm not saying I've got the answer, but it is about bringing back the fun. And I think we've got to work on that after Christmas. And I'm certainly looking forward to my Christmas party with my team on the 9th of December. Yeah.
We want a video camera. Final thought from you.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to hear perspectives specifically out of Asia Pac. partly because Catfinity, we are an international organisation, and many of our clients and the organisations we support are global in their nature. And I think what the pandemic did in one breath was make the world seem very small, because we have all been going through an identical kind of, the same virus going globally. Yeah. So, the borders have become redundant, but then at the same time there is still differences around how different places in the world have handled it. And the Lara, and you were talking about housing in Asia, like it's just really interesting to see the differences. And so I think that leaves us as professionals who support people within organisations with a bit of a dilemma, especially when they're global organisations, because it's how do we take the commonality to achieve some quick wins and work out what we need to do, while still appreciating and acknowledging the nuances and the differences for different people within different cities, within different countries, within different parts of the world. So yeah, Catrina, same as you. I don't have the answers. I'm just left thinking, wow, what an exciting challenge stroke opportunity. So yeah, really useful conversation. Thank you.
Brilliant. So thank you both, Lara and Catrina, for joining us today. So pleased we can make it work at an Asia time with all everyone's different responsibilities outside of work. We found a time that would work. We'll be back, Celine and I, in 2 weeks' time at our usual time slot. We'll be talking about agility in leadership with a guest from News UK and from the NIHR. So really looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks everyone.